tell you a little story just to get us started, Jeffrey? That
Yeah.
in '99, I started in a cinema, started working as an usher, and for me, it was the best part-time job I ever had. And I lied about my age when I started at the cinema so I could work there because you had to be 18. Fight Club was about to come out, I think, in '99, and there was Eyes Wide Shut, there was Blair Witch. But then when your film came out, when Final Destination came out, it was everyone was talking about it in a I would not say almost pre-internet way, like word of mouth, the way people were talking about it outside the screen. It was just a kind of a revelation, really, and it was such a joy. So I'd just like to thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. It was funny because I worked at the studio that produced it, and it was it really was a word of mouth hit. Like, because it opened, I think, at number 3 or 4 at the box office, and most horror films open high and then they drop about 50%. But it started growing. The audience started growing every week, so it really was. It was fun to be at the company and see that where people are like, oh, wow, the numbers are going up during the week, and okay, the second weekend it's doing better. And it's like, wow, this is a word of mouth hit. It's cool.
Was that your first? Was that your first feature? Did you obviously you came to the story and you? How did the kind of development of the script happen? Because I know you worked with James Wong and
Vin Morgan.
And obviously for X-Files fans, they're like two of the biggest writers.
They wrote some of the best X-Files episodes ever.
Absolutely. So how did that process start?
Well, it was a kind of an interesting trajectory because I had the idea and I used it to get an agent, and I actually wrote an X-Files sample to get an agent. And then my friends at New Line were like, this is a really good feature idea. You should do it as a feature. So back when I worked at New Line, you could sell treatments, like 5 or 6 page treatments to a studio. But I knew that since I worked there, I'd already submitted other work of mine there, and some of it got good coverage and some of it didn't. But even the stuff that got good coverage, they didn't really take it seriously. So I knew I needed to pair up with some producers. So I took my treatment to Craig Perry and Warren Zide, and we developed it into like a 12-page treatment that changed a lot over the course of us going back and forth with New Line. And finally, it got to a point with New Line because they were really hung up on not having a death figure. Like they're like, we don't understand how you could do a movie with that. It's a horror movie. How can you not show the villain? You can't fight it. We're like, that's the whole point. And finally, we told them the producer said they were going to take it to Miramax if they didn't buy it. And they're like, all right, we'll buy it. And then they had me write the first draft of the script. And then they actually, because we'd done so much work in development on it, it was really a first draft that we submitted to the studio. I mean, I wrote a first draft. Craig gave me notes on it. I went through and did his notes, and then the studio pretty much like gave a thumbs up to the script and went out to directors. And it was just very karmic that it ended up with James and Glenn, because I remember Bob came up to me one day in the office. He's like, what do you think about the James Wong and Glenn Morgan from the X-Files? I'm like, are you effing kidding me? Like, they've done some of my favorite episodes ever. Yeah. So then, they came on and they did a lot of work, and it departed a lot from my original draft, mainly in that I'm a huge Nightmare on Elm Street fan. So my original take on how death got them was more psychological, like we would get into their heads and, bring their fears to life, but not in a Freddy way, more in a grounded, realistic way. And each kid committed suicide. So that ended up being a little dark, obviously. And so James and Glenn came up with the Rube Goldberg design, which I think is great because even though we never put a face on death, which I think would have helped it travel internationally, because we didn't, every culture believes in death. And if you don't show it, then every culture can put their own, use their own imagination. But I think the Rube Goldberg device kind of put it in everyday life, which I think even more,
Well, I will say that personally, I like that death is not a physical presence that you see, because like speaking for myself, I grew up with Hong Kong horror. Mm-hmm. Especially my parents were really into Gung Si movies, or hopping vampires. So like I grew up with monsters in my horror films, and when I was an adult and started expanding into Western horror, it's all the, you know, horror classics, especially zombies, which is what I'm into. But when I watched Final Destination, it kind of opened my mind to the idea of the horror of something that's not there.
Yeah.
And I just find that it works so well, you know. Maybe a monster would have helped it for marketing, but from a story standpoint and from a creativity standpoint, and, you know, being something so novel, especially for its time, I think it worked.
Oh yeah, like like the minute it was a success, everybody's like, "Yeah, we totally knew it was going to be a success from the beginning." And I'm like, "No, you didn't." We all hoped, but I mean, I had faith in it. Like I thought it would work, and I thought that James and Glenn did an amazing job too. So and the cast was like, I knew it would work, but I didn't. You know, you never think it's gonna. You know, you never think like 20 years later people are gonna be like, "Whoa, that was a Final Destination." Like I'll be out at the coffee shop and I'll hear somebody say that, and you know, like, "Oh, that's a Final Destination moment" to their friends, and you know, if they're cute, I want to be like, "I wrote that," but of course I'm not going to do that because I'm
But you just walk away with a great smile on your face.
Yeah, it's just like you just smile. You're like, "Okay, that's cool."
Yeah, it was such a shared experience. When going to watch that, there was such a vibe to it. People leaving, there was a real buzz to it. And I think the one of the detrimental things now with physical, obviously not at the moment, but with physical theaters being so big and having, you know, new buildings with big openings, more people walk out. You get a less intimate atmosphere, and when you get smaller, more intimate theaters, like the cinema I worked at was 6 screens, but it was quite tight the way you walked in. There's a lobby, people are waiting. There's kind of a real buzz. There's carpets, which for a cinema I love because I'm a kind of a big 80s fan, and it was just a vibe to it. And it actually moved from one screen to 2 screens in our cinema. And it was on one reel going through 2 projectors on this like this really odd system. I think it was a following couple of years later, they used the same system on Stigmata with Gabriel Byrne. I think it was Gabriel Byrne. Yeah. And it was like some sort of fortuitous thing. The print started to melt. So when you're watching Stigmata, there's this big scene with fire. Just everything was going crazy. But it was Final Destination was it felt like a real event that people shared, and word of mouth was such a good thing. And now marketing for films is crazy. You know, there's such an approach you have to do. I guess you have to kind of hit everyone in different ways. Blair Witch really kind of kicked things off in a different way in '99 with marketing, almost like a faux, like these kids are actually missing, but they're not, but they are. You know. So we've got a couple of community questions about the film, and my little personal thing is, I remember it was one of the kids gets strangled in the shower with the and does the water go back up the tap or something like that in one of them?
It goes back into the toilet. It's funny because that was part of the Rube Goldberg stuff that James and Glenn came up with. So I'm not sure.
Because that's the only
time you ever see. That's the only time in the franchise you ever see something kind of reverse itself. Like, but you know, maybe that probably. I mean, I can't speak for them, but it probably was maybe a little bit of a like, okay, we're not going to show death, but we'll give you this one thing.
A little hint, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Maybe. I mean, I get what it is. It does show there's a force, but that is the only time that, aside from a curtain blowing, you know, that we ever see like a physical reaction or retraction, I guess is the best phrase for it.
I think Michael had a question about was it the last scene, Michael, you messaged me about a couple of days ago?
Oh, I did have a question about the final scene where they go to France. I noticed that the actors look a little different from what they look like during the rest of the film. And while I recognize time has passed and there's makeup, they looked older, like legitimate older. Was that shot later?
Yeah. Okay. Because originally the original ending for the film was a lot softer. You know, in some ways. Like Alex died by getting electrocuted, and then it picked up with Keira Smith's character Carter and Devon Sawa's character, or Ali Larter's character, you know, with her with a new baby, and they're talking about Alex, and it kind of ends on like a kind of a happy note, you know, bittersweet happy note. You know, like Alex is dead, but life lives on with this child. But the test audiences hated that. They, you know, because, you know, it's a horror movie. So, and they're like, we don't want, you know, first of all, they thought it was sappy, but then they also were like, you know, they didn't like Alex dying because he's, you know, was the leading man. And they were unclear of like, well, is Carter now with Ali, or like, are they like together, or are they just like, what, he was an asset, like, so New Line did the amazing thing of reshooting the ending. And yeah, I remember when they wrote it, it was like, this is going to be expensive. It's going to be like it's going to be like $1 million some dollars to reshoot this ending.
Oh my God.
But it changed the audience. Because, you know, for me, when you leave a film, I don't like films where the killer jumps, where you think you've defeated the killer and the survivor starts to get away and the killer jumps out behind them. But for a film like Final Destination, you do want to leave the theater on a rush.
Absolutely,
you know, it's been a roller coaster ride. And so it was well worth it. It made such a difference, I think, in how the audiences responded to it, because it was.
I think that the way the seating arrangement on the plane, and the biggest shock at the start was when the plane exploded and the kids were being wrestled to the ground by the airport security, and everyone. I remember the other ushers, the other people at the cinema, people I was watching it with, because I watched it several times, and people are thinking about the order, like thinking about how things are going to work, trying to work things out. You don't see that in many horror films where you're trying to work things out. Who's going to survive? Has the order changed? Yeah. And that's what was really exciting about the film. I think that's why the word of mouth, you know, really popped so well.
That was really exciting, because I have to give my producer Craig Perry credit for that too, because, you know, I had the draft of the script, and he's like, it's really great, but he goes, we need something else just to elevate it a little bit more, so it's not just these people are dying. So, you know, of course, then I go into my like writer crazy mode, trying to figure out like one other element to add to it. And then I remembered, you know, like, oh, there's a seating chart. And then I, you know, in my brain, I was like, well, if the plane blows up, it gets destroyed. You know, originally I had the plane like kind of diving into the ground. So in my crazy head, I was like, well, it's going to kill the people in the front, you know, it's going to go back. But I just figured the seating chart. And so I called Craig up about that. I said, that way, and he was like, that's it. Good job.
Yeah, that really hooked people in. Because of technically, I know it's kind of morbid, but technically people do die in order in that kind of thing. So it made complete sense, and people would accept that. And I think it really kind of gave a bit more kind of geography in it. People are understanding why this was working this way. So more power to you for that. And
did you have to get any like specialist feedback on whether that was even possible? I'm just curious.
No, I just took writer liberty with that one, because I just figured there was a seating chart, and I figured if there's an explosion in one part of the plane, it's going to, you know, the explosion is going to burn through the crowd. And so even though it'll almost be instantaneous, it'll still happen in a certain order. So it was more, I had to figure out how to seat people. Once I figured that out, I just had to switch some characters around to where they're.
Absolutely. Is what I quite like about Don't Look Back, because we'll talk about that as well, is that it seems to be a kind of common thread in what you write, is that you like the coming together of a group, the group dynamic, trying to figure things out. And that for me is that really kind of, I really enjoy that. And like when you watch The Thing, for instance, when the team are trying to work things out, that for me, I absolutely dig that, because then I become one of them. I want to try and work things out. I want to be in McCready's tower working out who's walking across the snow, you know. So is that something that is something in, like, you when you used to watch horror, something that kind of, how you found that dynamic, how you kind of found that kind of group dynamic, and how you enjoy it?
It was probably because, you know, Nightmare on Elm Street is, the original is my favorite film. I almost feel like, you know, every time I talk, any interview I do, that always comes up. But, I think the fact that, Nancy, because we have acting wise, we have amazing final girls in so many franchises. But character wise, most of the final girls up until that point, all they really did was run and then stab the killer, and then he would pop back up and they'd run him some more and hide. And Nancy was the first one who actually studied books and booby-trapped her house and then went into the nightmare after Freddy. So I think that template for a final girl got in my head about solving a mystery, and that just kind of expanded out into, when I'm doing movies with ensembles, it's just kind of been there. It's so funny because I notice, I don't notice personally themes in my work when I'm writing them, but I notice them when I'm later on or when people point them out to me, like, oh, this is kind of a recurring thing in your work. And so then I have fun kind of like trying to figure out where that came from.
Yeah, absolutely. John Carpenter's a big fan of that, obviously, with his people being stuck in a certain place, like Assault on Precinct 13 as well. Yeah. But yeah, that's something I really enjoyed about Don't Look Back as well, because I believe it's a retelling of the original short. Is that right?
Well, I actually wrote the script before the short, but I hadn't directed anything up until then. So everybody was like, you need to direct something. So what I did is I took the Nathan character, who videotapes the assault in the park, and then I just wrote a completely separate story around him that was skewed completely supernatural, just because I wanted to show that I could direct scares and suspense. So it's different than the iteration of this film, obviously, because this film is like, you're not sure if it's supernatural, if it's a killer, or if it's in her head. But yeah, I wrote the short after the feature. But it's funny because when it came to like the credits on the film, the guild said, well, the short came out first, so technically you have to just, it came out first, so this technically isn't like an original. So you have to say, you can't say written by, it has to be screenplay by, because it's considered a derivative. And I was like, oh, okay.
All right, that's really interesting. How did you, because I want to kind of touch upon the original short Good Samaritan, because I noticed that you got Jane Badler.
I know.
And as a young boy, watching V, Jane Badler was the mega star in my life. Yeah.
Yes.
You got Michael Ironside as and then some of the other actors and that who I still absolutely love. But what was that experience like working with her?
Well, the funny thing is, because Nightmare on Elm Street's my favorite movie, and V is my favorite miniseries of all time, and Jane Badler is I love her. But she lives in Australia. So I actually got in touch with her on Facebook, and sent her some information about me and told her how much of a fan I was, and asked her if she would be in my short. I said, I'll have somebody over there shoot you. And she was so sweet. She's like, of course, she was so nice. And we become friends now. She came to LA and I got to meet her. And honestly, that was the first time that I've been starstruck. Like, people use that word, and I never knew what starstruck meant, because I worked at a studio. I got to meet all kinds of big celebrities, and you just kind of, it's cool, but you just kind of you're like, whatever. But when I met Jane, we met at a cafe, and I sat down, and she came up and she sat down, and then I tried to talk, and then I couldn't, and then I was just like, and then I took a breath. I'm like, okay, I'm actually for the first time starstruck, so let me just compose myself.
Yeah.
And she was just like the lovely, she is, like, we still stay in touch. She's just a wonderful, I want to use her in a feature. She's just so talented, and she's just such an amazing person, but she played such a, Diana was just like one of the best.
Yeah, I think it was my first foray into kind of science fiction TV when I was much younger. And my eldest brother is a big influence on me. He introduced me to Freddy, and I had nightmares for years. And obviously Christopher Lee's Prince of Darkness. And then he said, "Oh, we should watch V." And the scene where she's like eating the rats, where the camera guy's in the air vents watching, there was some sort of weird erotic thing going on as well.
Yeah.
So she absolutely just rocked it. Absolutely rocked it in that.
And she's a great singer. She's a wonderful singer. She's a lovely, lovely person. So
was that fun directing her from a distance?
Yeah. And she was was so easygoing. She's like, I want to make sure I get it right. So she went to different location, and I didn't even ask her to go to all the locations, but
Oh, wow.
she took different out. She really went like 200%, and just really gracious.
Well, that's testament to kind of your writing, because you must have really enjoyed the material as well, and kind of the experience talking to you, working with you. So
We'll say that.
So was the short initially for like a testing ground to kind of flesh out, have a go, so to speak, at directing?
It was a testing ground to more show my style as far as a director goes. But I think the biggest difference is, that was definitely kind of my supernatural kind of style, like supernatural horror, like building tension and all that stuff. So it again, I like to clarify, because I think people, if they go into Don't Look Back expecting that same kind of dark, moody, Conjuring kind of project, this isn't it, because I wanted to use it more as a directing sample. And I was just trying to think of something to do, and I was like, oh well, I could just take the Nathan character and like build a story around him.
So what was the I've got to say, the standout performer, Courtney Bell, I thought she was absolutely, Michael and I were talking about this earlier, she's absolutely fantastic. And obviously for me, I've never seen her in anything else, but I think this is a strong performance by her. She really kind of holds everything together. She's really believable as well. So what was that kind of, how did you find her? What was the kind of process like?
Well, I was very fortunate to find her. We did auditions, and that's why I'm glad that we were able to do, the film as an indie film, even though, obviously there are limitations production-wise to what you can do. You do get creative freedom with what you can do. And I wanted to find the best actress, but I also wanted to find a Black woman, a Black actress for this lead role, because it was just written, because I'm very big on, I think inclusion is as important as having stories that are specifically about certain groups. And I know that when we had this set up at a studio, like all the actresses that were being sent were white actresses, and they're interesting, but I've had other projects I'm working on where we've been looking for a largely ethnic cast, and I saw so many amazing actors and actresses that I'd never seen before, and I'm like, I just want to look at a different pool. And so her name came up, and she had a website with some, before she came in for audition, I went to her website, and she had a bunch of shorts that she'd done, and she had I think she was in the quick scene in It Follows, but in every short I just saw like an aspect of Caitlin. So I saw that thing, and before she even came in the audition, I'm like, she's Caitlin. They're like, well, wait to see her audition. I'm like, no, she's Caitlin.
My favorite, I'll cut this out if it's a spoiler, but the moment where the scene's being recorded, and she's frozen, I thought that was absolutely fantastic in terms of, I really believed, like, if I was in her position with what happened to her father, then I would be absolutely frozen that way as well.
Yeah.
And yes, from then on, I absolutely was kind of rooting for her as well to figure out what's going on. So what was the kind of process for you like? Do you do rehearsals, or was it kind of a table read and then straight into production?
We didn't have a chance to have a proper rehearsal. We went down to Baton Rouge for a month just to do like locking in locations and getting everything ready. What I did with the talent is, I took our leads out, first of all, to dinner and I called them immediately after we gave them the role, and we talked about the script, we talked about their characters. I just made myself very available to them. Courtney and Will have theater backgrounds, so they're very, they take, not that anybody doesn't take their craft seriously, but with a theater background, you have to build, you build a whole life, the same thing you do with film, but in theater, it's a very big thing to kind of make sure you build a whole life for your character that's not on the page. Mm-hmm. So we talked about all of that, and had a lot of good conversations with them. And for me, it was mostly about being collaborative and open. I mean, I knew what I wanted, but because I have a theater background as well, I know that talent brings ideas that if it's a good idea, I know how to kind of sift through the ideas. And so I always make myself like open to like hearing input, especially, you know, from her. It was her first film.
Yeah.
She did a wonderful job, but she obviously had a lot of, she didn't bring it to set, but I could just, I just knew like she's got a lot of weight on her shoulders, you know, carrying a film. Like that's
Absolutely,
a lot of pressure.
yeah.
Mhm.
And so I just made sure that we talked all the time, that she was comfortable all the time, that, you know, if there are any questions, the same with all
Oh,
the
sorry, yeah. You had this real vibe that you could see the pressure on her during production as well.
I could tell sometimes, like, again, she didn't show it on screen, but I just knew,
Yeah.
you know, she's a young actress and she's carrying a movie. And so I knew no matter how many, because I'm the same way as a writer. If this was my first big writing assignment, I don't care how many times people tell me I'm a great writer. I'm still going to be, I just know, because I'm a, you know, artist as well. Like I know, like, so I would assure her, but I knew like she's still under a lot of stress, you know, she's got to be. So I just, you know, tried to make everything as comfortable as possible for her. But she didn't demand any, like there was nothing I had to do special. Like she had a great time on set. And we also, one thing we did was we shot all the stuff in the house in the first week. So the first week of shooting was just me, Skylar Hart, who plays her boyfriend Josh, and then Orlando Street, who plays her dad. And so we got to kind of ease her.
That's a really good idea.
The first day we got to ease her, but then the next days it was like, okay, in this scene you're hysterical, in this scene you're freaking out, in this scene you're crying, and then so then we had her jumping all over, and now you're being dragged through the rain, and so we put her through the rain.
That was almost a little Freddy, that scene for me where she goes between the houses. I loved it. I was like, that's a little nod, but I loved it. Absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
And that was, this is going to sound ridiculous, but I'm a big fan of rain in films, because I spoke to Alex Proyas, one of our judges for our festival, and we were talking about the rain machines in that film. And that's why I just love that scene. And it was a great little nod to Freddy.
I did learn something about rain machines though, because my DP was like, make sure you tell them it's a light rain, because if you don't, they'll make a monsoon. And I wrote in the script light rain, but I wasn't paying attention because I was focused on so many things, because that was our last night of shooting. We had stunts, we had crows, we had rain, and the first couple of takes they poured the rain, and so they drenched the walkway's like mud, you know, it was like mud after like 2 takes. So I was like, lighten up the rain, but it's like, oh, it's already a slush now between the.
Yeah. Because there's quite a few shots to the ground, but I absolutely love that. So that went really well. I think you did a great job with your first feature. And what was the most, because this would be really interesting to a lot of our filmmakers who are just making horror shorts at the moment. What was your biggest kind of fear going in, or kind of where did you experience that you kind of lent on individuals to kind of help you out as a director?
You know what's funny, because I've been on the sets of most of my films over the years, so I've been very fortunate to like have good relationships with like 99% of the directors, and I've just learned from all of them. So having done the short, I think I got a little, I didn't realize the stuff that I didn't know. You know, it wasn't like I was cocky going in like I know everything, but I was like, oh, well, I've done a short, I've been on sets, I've storyboarded the movie, I know what I'm doing. And so I was a little I started getting overwhelmed a little bit once we started shooting. And a lot of that I think was because I found myself because I'm a Cancer, so I worry about everybody and I want to take care of everybody. So I realized on a short set, it's easier to like talk to everybody and make sure everybody's doing cool. But when you're on a feature set, you know, you can't take on the responsibility about worrying about, you know, has everything been picked up over here where our lead's going to fall? Has everything been like, you have to be aware of that, but you have to like let your team like take care of all that stuff. And so I was like, there was a lot of times where I was just like worried about, you know, well, you know, Courtney fell really hard the last time. Are we sure she's okay? And this, and you know, and the grip guy just slipped it, you know, so I found myself like worrying so much about, like, I think I would overthink a lot of things. Like there was like a location that we wanted, but they told us that they would, if we had more than a certain amount of people there, that they would shut us down. And
because of the indie nature of the film.
no, just because of like there was a kind of a set piece that we had where we were going to be in a big location, and yeah, we'd had to have a bunch of lights and a bunch of things, and the place was not structurally as sound as it should be. And I know that we were, you know, it's like, well, do we use that location? Do we not? And, you know, some of my team was like, well, you know, we'll do it. We'll take care of it. And I really wanted to use this location, but then I'm like, but I don't want them to shut us down. And then later on, my director friends were like, yeah, but if they told you they would take care of it, you just pick it and then let them fucking deal with all the drama. But I was like, yeah, but what if they shut us down? He's like, so, yeah, that was a, but as far as advice goes, I mean, I think you might think you're over-prepared, like, again, because I had the whole movie storyboarded out. So I thought, you know, we got the reference here. Well, I'll sit down with my DP. We'll just go through a shot list and we'll be good. But we did that also before. We did that based off the old locations that we had when we location scouted. So we didn't have them based off the storyboards based off the new location, because we were supposed to, again, we were supposed to shoot it at a bigger budget. It all fell through after we location scouted. We took a couple of, you know, months to lick our wounds, and we decided we were going to do it independently. So we kind of went back to try to, you know, redo everything. So locations changed and things like that. But I think having a, you know, I thought doing a short and a feature, it was just like, okay, well, a feature is just more people and that's it. But it's actually, there is a lot more to that. You are handling a lot more people, but each of those people has a team under them. So you have to make sure the communication is extremely clear, that you're in sync with all of your department heads. You've got to be ready to change stuff on the fly, you know, because we can be, especially if we've written something, we can be precious about what we're doing. So I think you have to manage expectations. You know, one thing with this film is it was written for a bigger scope than it. And there were some things that I changed in the script, but we thought we could get the rest of it. And then when we got down there and started realizing like what we could do, I was like, yeah, you guys can't really get me everything you said you could get me, right? So there were like some compromises and things we had to make on the fly. But the good thing is you have a team with you who's all trying to make the film happen and make it as good as possible. So making sure that you have that team is important. And if there's somebody who's not coming with that spirit, because I've always heard like there's, you know, you usually find like one or two like people on set who are just troublemakers, you know, that's just in their nature to kind of stir up trouble, and you just have to get rid of those people.
Absolutely. I want to ask you advice for actors that are starting out, because what you said about Courtney Bell and finding her content online, what would your advice be for new actors or actors putting themselves out there for, in their way, the kind of content they put out? Would you recommend kind of short films? What would your advice be?
I mean, I think I think everybody's an individual, so I think it's really it's finding what your niche is, because the thing about this industry is as a creative, you want to show people that you can do everything. You know, even as a writer, it's like, yeah, I want to show people I can write comedy and horror, but there's a business side of this. And with, you know, 300 million people in this country alone, like, you know, they're not all trying to be actors, but, you know, there's millions of people trying to like get noticed professionally. But now, unfortunately, we've got a lot of, you know, in the age of Instagram, we have a lot of influencers who are trying to get noticed just to make money. So now you have to not only compete with them for eyeballs, but so it's easy if somebody can brand you. Like, it's easy if somebody says Jeffrey Reddick, they automatically think horror, you know, supernatural. They're like, okay, we know this guy. We can trust this guy. So I always tell creative people, like, find that thing that if you had to pick something to do for like 10 years, like a genre to be in, something that you're really passionate about. Pick the thing that you'd be most passionate about, and then start building content around that. Because when people notice you for that first thing, that's what they want more of. Like, you know,
Absolutely.
if I just sold a comedy first, you know, they would have not been, they'd been like, well, bring us your next comedy. That's cute, you write horror.
Yeah.
But on the positive side there, with, you know, iPhones and with shooting, being able to shoot 4K, the ability to create, you know, great looking content for cheap, like,
Absolutely.
is astounding. So if you're an actor, you know, connect with some good people and, like, you know, put stuff together with them. You know, it's always good. Surrounding yourself with good people is like the most important thing. And people who are serious about doing this, like,
Yeah.
you know, you'll meet a lot of people who want to, you know, I just want to be famous. Well, they don't want to act, they want to be famous. So
Yeah.
find yourself, you know, around people who are artists like you are. If you're a writer, like, get to know some directors, like, start making your own content, because that's one way to get noticed. You know, if you don't put anything out there in the world, you're not going to get noticed.
Yeah, and after today, I'll send you what we've sent out to our judges, just so you get a feel of what the type of horror films we've been receiving. We've received submissions from all over the world, and Michael and I watched them over the last week or so.
Oh yeah,
and it, like you say,
all 30 of them. Yeah,
absolutely, yeah. So the scope and the talent people have got, like Alex Proyer said it to an email to me a few days ago, is that the tools are available now to make something great, and just a few locations, if you're good with your lighting, your story's paramount, obviously, you can produce something fantastic. So it's a great place for actors, filmmakers to perform is at home. You can do anything now.
Yeah.
So I think COVID-19 has proven that you know, when people are forced to actually use less to still create, they're capable of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, you know, lack of an easy, you know, let me order this piece of equipment to solve this problem, makes you become more ingenious and trying to figure out ways to solve problems.
Absolutely. I think Michael had some questions about Day of the Dead.
Yes.
Oh, how did you get involved with that? Because I'm a huge George A. Romero fan, and I've liked most of the remakes, Dawn of the Dead being my favorite, but Day of the Dead is phenomenal. I'm just wondering how you came into that, and what was your approach to it?
Well, it's funny because that's the one movie I usually have to make apologies for. But let me start with how I usually end. I think as a zombie movie, it's really good. Like, it's really entertaining. It's really fun. I wish it wasn't called Day of the Dead because of how it turned out. And then I'll go back to how I got started on the film. This production company that had the rights to it called me, and they said, "Hey, we're looking for somebody to adapt Day of the Dead." And I was like, okay, well, that's just asking for somebody to put their neck on the chopping block. But they said, but we've got Steve Miner attached to direct the film. And I was like, holy crap, I love Steve Miner. I'd love to work with him. So I went in and pitched a couple of takes, and the take that they went with was very faithful to the original film, just updated to modern times. And it had some of the twists that the feature has in it. But once they greenlit me writing it, once I started writing the script, then I started getting notes to, like, take it away from the original. So then they started stripping out stuff from the original. And then to the point that I was like, guys, like, the fans are already gonna, even if we made a really faithful adaptation, they were gonna hate us, but now they're really gonna hate us. And you're also just making, you know, there were just things that they were making me do that creatively it wasn't working for me at a certain point. So I was super glad to work, you know, with Steve Miner. I think we had a great cast for the film.
Oh yeah.
And at the end of the day, it is a really good zombie movie. It's just people that are George Romero, you know, purists did not like it.
I can understand that, but, like, I try to, at least for me, I try to look at remakes also on their own legs, which is why I personally liked it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad. I'm glad. I was waiting for you to go, I've always loved the remakes, including Content. Yours was the first one I didn't love, because that's what I usually get.
That certainly was not one of them that I did.
Well,
I enjoyed it.
if Hitchcock can remake his own films, then anyone's allowed to, have a remake and have a good stab at it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and we've got a few community questions from Hellbound fans we posted yesterday, and I think it's called Gore Girls. I got that right. They've asked, what was your favorite death scene from Final Destination?
I always cheat on this one. Well, I don't cheat. My favorite set piece is the log truck in the second one. So that's my favorite set piece. I'm always torn on my favorite death scene because it used to always be the Todd in the shower in the first one because that's just so intense. But after 5 came out, the gymnast scene is my favorite.
Yeah.
That scene made me that was the first time in a long time where I was in the screening watching it and was getting all tense. And then when she got it, I literally yelled because I was like, whoa, I was not expecting that. So I think the gymnast scene in the 5th one is my favorite.
My favorite from the original was the I think it was the computer monitor exploding with a piece of glass. It was something really, and like you mentioned, the guy, the kid in the shower. There's something, and it harpers obviously back to Kruger as well. When you've got the glove in the bath, I think that was in the first one. When you're completely exposed. In the shower scene in Psycho, when you've got no chance of getting away.
Yeah.
I think there's something really powerful about that. It's there's so many good ones. And
there's so many good ones. Yeah.
The log truck scene's great. I love the second one. Yeah. So one of the other questions was, how do you get? This is from Ian Rayburn, a fellow horror filmmaker. How did you get your start in horror? How did you kind of start to love it? Was it something you loved, or was it a friend that introduced it?
Yeah, I have always enjoyed horror. I had me and my 2 best friends growing up were Tony Calhoun and Calvin Salmon. We used to get together and watch, and with my sister sometimes, but mostly not. And just find the scariest, bloodiest movies that we could find, just totally. So we were kind of obsessed with them at a young age. And my mom, it's funny because at first she'd be like, how can you watch that stuff? But then after a while she was like, well, they're hanging out. They're not out doing drugs or getting in trouble. We'll let them watch this horror stuff. But I will say Nightmare on Elm Street's the movie that made me fall in love with the genre.
Yeah.
Where I'm I have to do this. I really liked them. I mean, I did love them before, but with Nightmare on Elm Street, I fell in love with the genre. But yeah, it started off with just me and my friends, trying to be rebels because everybody was like, how can you watch that? We'd bring Fangoria to school and they're like, how could you look at that gross stuff? And we're like, cause we're cool.
Absolutely. I think Kruger, it stuck with me for so many years. And the recurring nightmare I had, I think it was possibly from Dream Warriors, where there was a character put in a high chair and she was being fed her own stomach.
Oh, that was 5, I think.
Was that 5?
Yeah.
And that was the scene, that was the nightmare that recurred for me for so many years. And then I met Robert Englund at one of these kind of Collectomania things, cons. And the photo of, I told him that story, and then we posed like he was feeding me my own stomach. So it was a way of kind of washing myself clean of that nightmare.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But yeah, Kruger, there's just something so visceral about and immediate about the film as well, because showing too much is the biggest issue. Showing the monster is definitely the issue. I got one little question about Don't Look Back. Was it really straightforward with the crows in terms of working with the crows and shooting those? Or was it a complete nightmare?
That's funny. I love it when people, because everybody asks you about the crows. I think crows are divas. The mice were much easier to work with. No, we had some great animal wranglers, and the crows were very good at landing and hitting their marks. But they were very stubborn about doing what we wanted them to do. And there were 2 scenes in particular. there's a scene which is in the trailer, so it's not a spoiler really, where Caitlin and another character, Kurt, are looking out his window at a crow on the ground, and all we needed the crow to do was to fly in, look up at the window, and then fly off. It took us forever to get that friggin' crow. Like originally it was supposed to flop around on the ground, and then they couldn't get to do that. We're like, well, let's just have it land, but it kept not coming. It kept landing and then like walking right off, like walking off. And I remember watching the dailies, and I had those, and I didn't realize it because when you're on set, you're so focused on getting the shot that I forgot that I had poor Courtney and Damon like standing in the window for like, I was watching the daily for 45, like it was like 45 minutes. We're trying to get that crow, and they stood there the whole time just being like so professional. I apologized the next day. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe that I had you.
Yeah.
They're like, no problem.
It sounds like you learned so much from this process. And
oh yes, yeah. Like I'm ready to do it again, but it was such a great learning experience, and that's why I'm really glad too. It was kind of an indie film because it was an ambitious one in a way, because we did have so many characters and locations and stunts and animals and all this stuff you're not supposed to have in a first movie. So I feel like it was like a super heavy crash course in making a feature film. So I definitely know like all the stuff I didn't know going in.
Do you think you're going to be taking that experience to Final Destination 6, which they keep talking about, but nothing's happening?
Well, about Final Destination 6, there's definitely one in the works. Unfortunately, and this is for real, like, because I know there's always been like stops and starts, but to be honest, like New Line has kind of been, at some points they're like, well, maybe, but they were actually actively pursuing making a new one before COVID hit. So because those movies do have a lot of locations and actors and crew, we're going to have to they're going to have to wait till, kind of the business is back on track and everybody has like a stock load of films piled up that they have to release once theaters open.
We were talking, I was talking to someone that worked in casting on Nightmare Alley, I think is Del Toro's TV show. And it sounds like there's so many giant movies and juggernauts that are going to happen or about to happen that in terms of things being released. So next year, depending on what theaters do, because I know everyone's in a bit of a nightmare at the moment and theater chains are being hit really badly. And there's going to be an absolute explosion of releases and battles between studios of when to release things,
Yeah. I mean, I have a feeling because, you do also have to spend so much marketing to usually when you see a film's budget, the formula, and it may have changed with the digital age, but the formula was kind of like expect to double the budget for marketing because you have to cut through all the other, there's so many films coming out all the time. So the big templates of the horror films that were supposed to come out this year that got pushed to next year, the theater chains are planning their releases like 4 years in advance. So that's going to like screw up a lot of stuff. So a lot of movies will end up being like, you know what, if we premiere this on demand for $30, we're going to make more money.
Yeah.
Because we don't have to spend all that marketing money. So I think a lot of the movies won't get theatrical. But I think obviously there's certain filmmakers where, the theater experience is never going to die because people love going out.
Yeah.
We're social people. We love to like that communal experience. But I think it's going to be a shaky time while they sort out like all the releasing and the scheduling and things like that.
Absolutely. I just read that Coming to America 2 was going to be purchased by Amazon, and I was kind of, it kind of makes sense by based on what you're saying in terms of finding a different home for it, because things have got to get released at some point. But I would love to have seen that in the theater, because obviously I really hope it's great, because Eddie Murphy, when that film came out, he was top of the tree when the first one came out.
Yeah.
And it's a work of genius. We can all agree. I think Coming to America is a work of genius. And there's so many moments I could quote them. I absolutely love it. But I am a little bit disappointed it's possibly going to be on a streamer. I'd love to see that in a theater because the audience would be just, go crazy for that,
I get
So-
torn because, like with New Mutants, when they said they were going to put it out in the drive-ins, I'm like, they better put this. It's been, I've waited 2.5, 3 years for
Yeah.
this movie to come out. But there comes a point where it's like you want to see the movie more than you want to wait for like 4 years for it.
Yeah.
So
True.
it's like,
Yeah. There's
like
going to be some kind of waning, isn't there? Like exactly what you're saying. People want to see that. Like, how long are Disney really going to hold Black Widow back? It makes sense if you've got a giant movie that's got giant budgets and all of that.
Yeah.
You want to get the most from it, and this is just a personal thing. But Disney made a couple of mistakes with Mulan because I think it was 2 weeks after they released on Disney Plus to rent for $30 or $25. You could buy it outside of Disney Plus for the same price. So if you rented it or you had it on Disney Plus, you still have to continue to pay for Disney Plus to be able to watch your version of Mulan. So there's going to be, studios are going to make, or streamers are going to make great decisions and bad decisions as well. But
mostly bad. If they can make more money, they'll make the bad decisions. Whatever's going to make them more money.
Yeah.
Speaking of COVID, has that been a factor in terms of the release of Don't Look Back?
Yeah. We were gonna definitely do like a limited theatrical. So now that's turned into like we're gonna try to get into some drive-ins, but the issues now are, once The Wretched did so well, all of a sudden now all the studios are like going, hey, we can re-release stuff into drive-ins. So it's getting harder to get your movie into a drive-in now. So I'm not sure if we're gonna. I just reached out today to find out if we're still gonna be playing any drive-ins, but yeah, it definitely impacted the release in that we were going to have a theatrical, but this October was always the month that they were going to put it out.
Absolutely. Just got a couple of more questions, Jeffrey. Is there anything that kind of struck a chord with you horror-wise the last few years? Anything that kind of tickled your fancy and you really enjoyed?
It's so funny because I actually should make a list, because when people ask me, like my brain freezes, and then I start thinking about my friends' movies, and then I'm like, oh, I better mention it. No, but movies that I mean, Invisible Man, I thought was.
Oh, I love that. That was the last thing I saw before lockdown. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Lee won out, like, because I loved Upgrade too. Like, I think he's like astonishingly talented. So Invisible Man really hit me. Get Out, I'm kind of going back to low hanging fruit now, because that's years ago. Yeah. But I'm just trying to think, like
but I think that what Jason Blum's doing with a Universal is fantastic, and Universal made a huge error from a film fan point of view with the Dark Universe. I love the idea, but when you see the photograph of all those really kind of A-list actors, that could have been potentially great. But the low budget nature of what Bloom does and does really well gives filmmakers a real chance. When I saw The Invisible Man, I thought it was a masterstroke, putting it from the point of view of Elizabeth
Moss.
Because she's been fantastic since I saw her in West Wing. I thought, she's been top draw everything she's been in, and there were so many kind of subtle little things like the gun and the way the camera moved, the gun in the kneecap, the actual tech. Because I was thinking about this between two different buildings today, that some people that watched it, I don't like how the Invisible Man technology was working. I was like, well, it's not really going to be an alchemist anymore like Claude Rains in the original.
Right.
It's going to be something like The Suit, and I absolutely loved it. And and the location scouting, especially that house, that was such a character. It was a marvel to watch. I really enjoyed it. But then on the flip side, I went to see Tenet, and I was massively disappointed.
I haven't seen it, to be honest.
There's a lot of kind of audio issues when you can't hear an actor speak in a film and you're straining. There's a bit of an issue.
But that's on purpose. Everything that I've read, like he did it.
Okay.
That's it wasn't a theater thing. Like he that was his choice, was to have the music and score be so loud. So yeah, I haven't seen it either because I heard it's like people are, the people that like it are like it's one of those movies you have to see about 5 times to get everything. And I'm like, nah, I don't need them. Like, I want a movie that I can enjoy, and then if I want to go back and discover other stuff, then I'll do it. But if I'm just not going to get it the first 3 times, and I'm pretty smart, I'm not going to go see it in the theater.
Absolutely. I've got a question about a future project. I'm not too sure what this is. What's Samurai Rabbit?
Oh, it's awesome. I'm actually writing on a couple of animated series for Netflix, and Samurai Rabbit is actually a spin-off of the Usagi Yojimbo comic book. Yes. I know. And we have the creator Stan's his blessing on it, so he's overseeing stuff. So even though it's a spin-off, it won't, well, I shouldn't say it won't, because fans always get upset by stuff. But we have Stan's blessing on it, and it's been really, really awesome to work on. And then, so it's a project that's coming that Netflix is producing with Gaumont, and I'm just really excited about it. It's a new world for me. It's not scary killings. It's more fun adventure. There's still stakes, but it's a younger property.
I think Netflix has really smashed it out of the park with animated shows recently.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you look at Bill Burr's show, I absolutely love that. F is for Family, and just giving, get a real chance. I was really gutted that the OA and Dark Crystal Age of Resistance weren't going to continue. But yeah, I think the animated shows on Netflix have been real pleasure to watch.
Yeah.
What's that kind of process like? Are you in the midst of writing that at the moment?
Yeah. I'm writing. I'm trying to make sure I don't say anything. I'm writing my 3rd episode now. So, but
Fantastic.
it's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Jeffrey.
Actually, I have one.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Of course. You can ask me if you want, Michael.
No, it's just
I'm just quarantined at home right now, so
I do a podcast that where we introduce.
It's great.
And called Talking with Our Mouths Full. So people know me as a food guy. So I just wanted to ask you, what is your favorite Halloween candy?
Ooh, my favorite Halloween candy. Oh man, why am I having trouble thinking? Well, it's just like Hershey's chocolate. It's nothing fan. Like I'm a big chocolate guy. I like chocolate candy a lot. No nuts. I'll eat Snickers with nuts, but I don't like any other candy with nuts in it. But like candy corn, I don't like.
Oh, I don't like candy corn.
I don't like any. What's your favorite?
It's actually O. Henry.
Oh, okay. But those have nuts in them, right?
Yeah. Followed by Reese's Cups. So.
Oh no! Yeah. I totally take it back. Reese's Cups. I take it back. Reese's Cups are my favorite, actually. I'm not just saying that. Yeah. I love Reese's. No, those actually, I was just blanking on stuff, so then I thought chocolate bar, but no, Reese's, I get them all the time.
Yeah. Do you have any Halloween traditions that you do, like decorate your house or watch a series of movies? Or
I usually do a Halloween month anymore because I just enjoy the season so much. So I definitely watch as many horror films as I can, and where I live in West Hollywood, they have probably one of the biggest Halloween parades in the United States, which we're not having this year, unfortunately. But every year, me and my friends usually kind of dress up. Like last year, I think it was, we all went as like Bloody Carries. So we all had the prom dresses on with the wigs and the rose and the crown and fake blood on us. So we always kind of go as a group of something iconic for Halloween, and it's just really fun to go down and do that.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully I'll send you those short films that have been nominated for Best Film, Jeffrey. I think you'll get a real kick of those because there's films from Spain, Australia, the US, all over really. So
awesome.
you'll get a kick out of that. So thank you very much, Jeffrey. This has been an absolute pleasure, and thank you for taking the time out of your day to speak to myself and Michael.
Of course, and if you need anything, let me know. Okay.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I'll keep.
Do you all have my email address?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think, okay. I just want to make sure. Okay. Yeah. So if you need anything else, let me know. And
Absolutely.
keep me posted on what you're up to. And
Yeah.
definitely let me know when this gets posted and I'll share it. And
That'll be great. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm just gonna end the recording now, and then I'll fade out from there. I've got a little question for you. If there's we've got our Hellbound Horror Festival event on the 30th. So if there's kind of anything you want to, we're happy to put the trailer in the festival and that as well. So we'll work something out, and I'll send you an email separately about that, and we'll sort something out. Yeah. And yeah, well, thank you very much, Jeffrey. This has been great.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. It's really nice to talk to people.
Absolutely. You have a good day, mate. See you now.
You too. Take care, guys.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.